In a quiet little town surrounded by golden fields, there lived two siblings, Sophie and Baron. They had lost their parents when they were very young and now shared a tiny, weathered cottage at the edge of the forest. Though life was hard, the two of them faced each day with determination. Sophie worked as a laundress for townsfolk, while little Baron gathered firewood and fetched water to help his sister. Sophie was gentle, clever, and kind-hearted. Her smile could brighten even the gloomiest morning. Though her hands were rough from work, she had one small flaw: she tended to forget things. Baron, on the other hand, was still a boy, spirited and stubborn, but deep down, he adored his sister and wanted nothing more than to make her proud. Most days, their meals consisted of a few dry crusts of bread or boiled potatoes. Sometimes Sophie would secretly give her share to Baron, pretending she had already eaten. Their bellies were often empty, but their hearts were full of love. One noon, after working all morning, Sophie felt faint from hunger. Carrying her small lunch, she wandered into the forest, hoping to find a few wild mushrooms or greens. As she sat to rest beneath an old tree, she noticed an elderly woman hobbling toward her, leaning heavily on a stick. "My dear, I'm so hungry," the woman rasped. "Would you spare a little food?" Sophie looked down at her small bundle, just a few crumbs and some vegetables, but when she saw the old woman's pleading eyes, compassion filled her heart. "Of course, Granny, it's not much, but please, eat." The old woman's hands trembled as she accepted the food. She ate slowly, and soon color returned to her pale cheeks. Sophie smiled, happy despite her own growling stomach. Then, suddenly, a warm golden light surrounded the woman. In an instant, her ragged form melted away, revealing a beautiful young enchantress in a shimmering cloak. Sophie gasped, frozen in astonishment. "Kind girl," the woman said softly, "I am a witch, not one to be feared, but one who watches over this forest. Your kindness has touched me deeply. I want to give you something in return, this magic basket." She handed Sophie a small willow basket that glowed faintly in her hands. "This basket is enchanted," the witch explained. "When a good-hearted person speaks the words with gratitude, it will create any food you desire: rice, porridge, milk, or cool water. Say, right finger, basket, hear my heart, let the magic start. And when you wish it to stop, simply say, right finger, stop, magic basket, stop. But remember this: only those who live with kindness will keep its magic. If greed ever enters your heart, the basket will vanish forever." Overwhelmed with joy, Sophie thanked the witch again and again, holding the basket close to her chest as she hurried home, her heart full of hope. That evening, Sophie told Baron the whole story. He listened wide-eyed, half doubtful but curious. Sophie smiled and placed her hands on the basket. "Basket, hear my heart, let the magic start." At once, the basket began to glow. Steam rose in delicate wisps, carrying the rich, comforting scent of warm porridge. Within moments, the basket was brimming with food. The two children stared in disbelief before bursting into delighted laughter. They ate until they were full, truly full, for the first time in months. When they had eaten enough, Sophie spoke again. "Stop, magic basket, stop." And instantly, the flow ceased. From that night on, their home was filled with laughter and light. Each day, Sophie thought of something new: fragrant rice, sweet milk, hot soup, and the basket always obeyed. Their lives, once shadowed by hunger, were now blessed with warmth and plenty. One morning, Sophie had to leave early for work at the market. In her rush, she forgot to remind Baron how to stop the magic. Left alone, the boy's curiosity got the better of him. He remembered how his sister spoke the words, and with a grin whispered, "Basket, hear my heart, let the magic start." The basket began producing steaming rice. Just as before, Baron laughed in amazement. Then a mischievous thought struck him. What if I wish for gold instead? He closed his eyes and imagined piles of shining coins. But instead of gold, streams of water burst from the basket, gushing across the floor. Startled, Baron shouted, "Stop, stop, magic, something?" But he couldn't remember the exact words. The water rose higher and higher, flooding the tiny house. At that moment, Sophie returned and gasped at the sight. "Oh no," she cried. Then she shouted clearly, "Stop! Magic basket! Stop!" The flow stopped instantly. Silence filled the soaked little room. Baron's eyes brimmed with tears. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I just wanted to see if it worked. I didn't mean to." Sophie knelt beside him and smiled gently. "It's okay. I forgot to tell you the right words. But remember, Baron, we must always use magic with gratitude, never with greed." They spent the rest of the afternoon cleaning and drying everything. It was exhausting, but somehow they both felt lighter inside. From that day on, Sophie and Baron grew closer than ever. Mealtime became a moment of gratitude. Sophie would always remind her brother, "Let's be thankful for what we have." One morning, Sophie looked out the window at the village below. Many families were still hungry. She turned to her brother. "Baron, what if we use the basket to help others?" Baron nodded eagerly. And so, every morning, the siblings cooked warm porridge, rice, and milk from the magic basket, then carried it to the town square to share with the poor. Soon, laughter and joy spread throughout the village. People came not only for the food, but to see the kind-hearted children whose smiles never faded. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, an old beggar approached them. His clothes were torn, his voice weak. "My dear children," he said, "I've heard of your magic basket. In a distant village, many little ones are starving. Would you let me borrow it, so I can help them too?" Sophie and Baron exchanged a glance. They had all they needed now: food, warmth, and happiness. What mattered most was the chance to do good. Without hesitation, Sophie placed the basket in the old man's hands. "Please take it," she said softly. "If it can save others, then it belongs to them." The old man smiled, and in an instant, his frail form shimmered and changed. Before them stood the young witch once again, radiant and graceful. "My dear children," she said kindly, "you have learned the truest meaning of goodness, that kindness is not only in receiving, but in giving. As a reward, the magic basket shall stay with you forever." From that day forward, Sophie and Baron used their basket to feed the hungry every single day. Their small cottage became the warmest place in the town, a home filled with laughter, kindness, and love. Sophie often told her brother, "The basket is precious, Baron, but the greatest magic of all is kindness. When we share what we have, our hearts become more powerful than any spell." And indeed, they both came to understand, the real magic was never in the basket at all. It was in their hearts that knew how to love and share.